I work for a university here in Southwest Missouri called Missouri Southern State, and I do the printing and the mail there, and which is kind of cool because I can print flyers and posters for the band and stuff like that, and hell, I've even printed inserts for record labels and stuff, just on the not on the side, but man, I just charge them what I would charge like a department for at work, but but yeah, it comes in pretty handy for stuff like that. But anyways, during the summer, I only work 4 days a week, so I get 3 day weekends. So it's pretty awesome. But but yeah, that was kind of basically what I was getting at. But
Yeah, that's great. And that must really help out. So you're kind of like working with Black Duma on like a
Mhm.
really like you're practically also like working for the label at that point. If you're
Yeah,
like doing the
honestly.
inserts, doing the like that's
Mhm.
pretty awesome actually.
Yeah, yeah, man. Like I did all the inserts for our last vinyl release, and I've got some I don't do like design work much, but I can do some stuff because I'm in front of a computer all day. So the DIY aspect kind of comes into play, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
but it still looks professional and saves money and everything for the label. So yeah, it really does. It helps us out a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Now, the last before Black Duma, that last label, were you putting out vinyl on that label as well?
That was kind of a weird deal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a crowdfunded
Oh,
uh,
okay.
it was a crowdfunded release, which was kind of bizarre. We were on a label, but it was still crowdfunded. But yeah, that eh, not the best thing, honestly. But I mean, it was a lot of fun putting it all together. But honestly, we would have just done it ourselves if that was the way it was going to be. So, but anyway, I mean, we learned a lot doing that and how to do crowdfunding and stuff like that. And yeah, it was pretty interesting putting together all the packages and stuff for people that do all the pre-orders and things. And it's a lot of fun doing that. But the label thing's a lot easier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Quite an
Like,
upgrade.
yeah, honestly, and like they help out a ton with it's almost like a bank. You're getting a loan through a bank or something. They pretty much front the expense and then you pay them back, and you get what you need when you need it, and so it works out really really well. So
Yeah.
they're artist friendly and everything, and that we don't have to sell rights to anything, and so it's really good, really good.
Yeah, and I feel like Black Duma is the perfect label for Gravehuffer because you guys have always kind of been DIY. And
Right,
even
right, yeah,
now, you guys are
right,
still
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's really awesome. It's really cool to see. So congrats on the new
Thank you,
record.
thank you.
So what can you tell fans about the new release?
This is our fourth record. Um, we've been around since like 2008, and so we got four full lengths, and then we got an EP as well. Um, Honestly, I think this is our most figure out the choose my words carefully. I don't want to put anything down, but I feel like you know what I mean. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I just listened to it earlier today actually because I hadn't listened to it in a while. And I was like, man, I'm pretty damn proud of it. We all are really. And we're not a band that goes around just like giving everybody attaboys all the time or anything. But I think at the end of this one, we were kind of like, man, we should be proud of this, and we did give ourselves some attaboys and some congrats, and we told everybody good job, because we really put a lot into it, and not that we were lazy on any of the other albums. I think mainly what it was is we've just learned as we went, and I think we got something that is a little bit more what we're hearing in our head. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you're on the DIY thing, you hear things in your head and then you try to apply it to a recording or whatever it is you do, and it doesn't quite come out the way you're hearing it or envisioning it.
Mhm.
And this album was definitely one that was really close, really, really close to how we wanted it to come out. So it's very complete. package, I guess, so to speak. And Black Doomba's helped out as far as they did the CDs for us initially, which was a digipack, 6-panel fold out, really nice looking package.
Mm.
And the vinyl's going to be coming out soon. And they actually repressed that first album they released for us called Necro Reclosion. We sold out of the first edition, sold 250, something like that. And
Awesome.
yeah, which is pretty cool. And the next edition just came out like a week or two ago. And so yeah, we've already sold a handful of those, and I think the labels sold even more. So so that's always really cool, to be in a band that's like, hey, we've actually sold out of something,
Yeah.
and it's kind of neat, man. So we're feeling pretty good about where we're headed, and but yeah, as far as the new record, once the vinyl comes out, I think it's really gonna make sense for people, because the way it was put together was for the vinyl freaks, like the first 5 songs were meant to be listened to in one sitting on the first side of the record, and then you flip it over and it's just one long
Yeah.
22 minute song,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Dante's Inferno Divine Comedy thing, Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. It's one big long thing, and it's meant to put it on the record player, get the lyric sheet out, and just follow. Takes you on a journey, and we feel like we did a pretty good job with it. So we're definitely proud of it, for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There was totally a clear vision with this record,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the title track there. Because I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
listening to it for the first time, and I was like kind
Uh-huh.
of blown. I was like, "Whoa!" Like I had to double check the length, because there
Right.
was
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
2 2 minutes. It's like, I think it's like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes. It's like
Right. Yeah,
22
yeah.
minutes.
And then
Uh,
22 minutes. Yeah, you're like, what the
yeah,
hell?
yeah. So what made you decide, like, hey, let's just do a 22-minute track,
Right.
going from like very short songs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like the first batch of songs, I guess that's more of like our, what we do, and then the 22-minute thing. I'll just preface this again by saying myself and Mike, our bass player, we're kind of we've been in and out of bands together since like 96, 97, and been doing it for a long time. And we actually talked about doing like a long, like a Rush 2112 kind of thing, along, one, yes, close to the edge, like all those 70s prog bands did. And we're big fans of that, like Genesis, all that kind of stuff. And so we were like, well, what would be cool to do that? And I think Mike was the one that brought up the whole Dante's Inferno, Purgatory, Paradise thing. I was like, man, that would be pretty cool. And we never did get to it in the last band we were in the 90s. I think he ended up doing stuff like early 2000s in another band, and I had just got married and was having kids, and I was kind of out of music there for a little bit. And then we got back together in 2008, and we kind of forgot about it, to be honest. And then, I guess probably about 4 or 5 years ago, it got brought up again. And Mike's like, man, what do you think about doing this? And I was like, I've always wanted to do something like that. Like some of my favorite bands growing up had stuff like that. You put on the record and it's like one long journey. It's like that
Yeah,
was just kind of like how you grew up, or how we grew up. Like put the record on, put your headphones on. Some of us might, smoke or whatever, and then
totally.
get the lyric sheet out and the album cover, and just like get lost in it. And that's kind of what we were going for. And eh, I mean, initially I don't think we were ready to do this when we first started. But I just, you know what I mean, like, because
Yeah.
we were just kind of like playing like thrash punk type stuff. But as we got into our second and third record and the EP, we started doing like weird stuff in our music, and we thought, well, why not? People seem to like it when we kind of go off the outside the lines, so to speak. And so we thought, why not? Well, let's just get weird and do what we want to hear, And that, I mean, that's basically what we do. We just write music we want to hear. And if everybody
Yeah,
else likes it, then fuck yeah. That I don't know if I can curse, but
you say
that
whatever.
yeah. All right, all
It's
right.
internet.
Yay. But
That's funny, man.
yeah.
Would you guys do any like in the future? And I'm not sure if you're even thinking about like, this
Mm,
album came out this year. Would you
right.
want to experiment more into that, like a more like maybe proggy, elongated like songs, or is it just more in the moment what you're really feeling at the time?
I think right now it's a little bit like the latter, more in the moment. Just that's just kind of how we were feeling at the time. I mean, we never say never. We're not going to ever rule anything out because we've never had rules in this band. So, but I mean, I think it all started with a couple albums ago when we started putting like acoustic guitars and keyboards and stuff in music, and we're huge fans of Neurosis, and
Cool.
they're they kind of started out like just straight up punk rock, and then they got just completely went out there, and so I feel like we're kind of taking a similar path to them, but not comparing us to Neurosis at all, but just kind of like the progression of a band. And
Totally.
I kind of I like it like when you listen to a band and you listen to their catalog, and you can hear how they started taking chances and how they still made it work, because sometimes bands will do something different and like it doesn't work. But most of the time, if they're good musicians or they're sincere about it, then it's going to be awesome, and you're going to go on that journey with them. But yeah, that's kind of, we'll see what happens. I mean, we haven't really started writing new stuff yet. There's a few riffs lying around, and we're writing little bits and pieces here and there, and it seems to be the stuff we're writing here lately is more of kind of doomy,
Yeah.
like slower stuff. So yeah, I don't know,
Nothing
man.
wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, you never know where it's gonna go, and I kind of think that's why we like doing what we do, because we never know what's gonna come out, and that's what makes it exciting still.
Very exciting, and it's very interesting
Yeah.
to hear, and there totally is with your band, like, even starting from your first record, you can totally hear that evolution of, like,
Right.
the complete punk,
Hmm.
uh, inspirations and then very doomy stuff. So what would you say are, like, your main inspirations? Because you're pulling from so much in this band. There's
Right.
such a nice pot of so many different sounds, and they just flow very nicely, so I'd like to know what some of your
Hmm.
influences are.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely. I mean, it sounds like you've listened to some of our stuff, and that's awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Listen, man, if the guy who founded Hallows Eve tells you to listen to a band, I'm gonna listen to
Right? Yeah,
him.
no shit, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, honestly,
No, and
speaking
you
of
guys
Hollow,
rock too. Great
thanks,
stuff.
man. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of playing Hallows Eve with Tommy, and that's pretty badass. I've done it a few times now. We at the end of his Tommy Stewart's Direwolf set, he'll if Gravehuffer's playing, then he'll invite me up on stage and we'll do Metal Merchants.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
and dude, dude, like that's probably the almost I'm I'm almost guaranteeing that was probably about the most nervous I've ever been in my life. Was the first time
Wow.
I did that, and Tommy's like, "Oh, you did great," and I was like, "Dude, I was like freaking out the whole time, man." but
Yeah.
it was weird. Like once I started playing, it kind of went away, but it was still kind of like, I was like really hyper focused and hyper aware. But um, what was the question, dude? I went
Yeah,
off.
I no, it's all right. It's all right. Well, that's funny to
Influences.
hear. Yeah, yeah. Well, I just want to say this. That's so funny to hear. I did interview Tommy, and it
Yeah.
kind of led to this. And it's
Okay.
so funny because he was bringing that up. We're like, he's like, I'll play a Direwolf set and throw in a couple Hallows Eve songs in there,
Hmm.
and then suddenly it's a Hallows Eve reunion.
Right. Yeah.
So you're pretty much in Hallows Eve for a second.
Yeah. I mean,
Really,
yeah. Yep.
it's
Hmm.
crazy, and that
It
must be
is.
as a musician and a fan
Oh yeah.
very, very wild.
Yeah. It
Was
is.
yeah,
It's pretty
was
surreal.
yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Was like his music very big for you even before Black Doomba?
I mean, it was on the radar. It wasn't something that like I was familiar with Hallows Eve. I think maybe they were a little more like not before my time, but I think maybe they were just not really something that I was aware of when I was that age. And like I didn't start getting into that kind of stuff, you know, past like the big four and shit like that
Yeah.
until like the 90s. Um, I was familiar with all with like the main thrash bands and stuff going into like Testament and Exodus and Nuclear Assault, stuff like that. And that was just from my skater friends.
Yeah.
I would, it was like we were always skating, and then when you're skating, somebody was in charge of bringing music. So somebody brought their boombox, and then the rest of us would bring cassettes, and then you never knew what you were going to hear, and it was always really cool. Sometimes people would bring thrash, sometimes people would bring punk, sometimes it'd be hardcore, and sometimes it'd be like mellow stuff, like reggae or something. I mean, you just never knew what you were going to hear. And that was a really big inspirational and educational
Totally.
moments for
Yeah.
me, like skating and then like listening to all that, all these crazy different influences and genres, just all like in an hour or two, and you're skating and doing your thing, and all this music's just pumping through your head. But
Yeah.
initially I got to say it was my parents. Like my dad was stationed in the army he was stationed in the army in Germany in the late 60s and early 70s, and he brought back all this stuff because we're in the Midwest. Like, dude, the stuff that was big here was like country and stuff like that.
Mm.
Nobody knew who Led Zeppelin was. Nobody knew who Deep Purple was or Black Sabbath or anything like that. My dad comes back playing all this stuff and Judas Priest, and um, you
Wow.
know, his friends are like, "What is this crap, Donnie?" And he's like, "Oh, this is." I heard all this when my dad got to see Led Zeppelin, and he got to see the Who, and he got to see Black Sabbath. Well, I don't know if he got to see Black Sabbath, but he got to see all these bands back in the day, like 70, 71. And he brought all that back. And I remember digging through his record collection and seeing all that stuff. And like, as a matter of fact, my parents named me after Deep Purple's guitar player, Ritchie Blackmore. And
Wow.
yeah, so I guess I was destined to be a guitar player. But
Yeah. Wow. That's so
so I
cool.
mean, right. So I grew up with a lot of that kind of stuff in my house. And like I said, and then getting into my teens and listening to punk rock and the thrash and stuff, and then starting to play guitar, and then getting with my guitar buddies, and then they're introducing me to like Frank Zappa and stuff like that, and gosh, who else? Some of the guitar players for Eddie stuff, Yngwie Malmsteen and Steve Vai, and I mean the list just goes on. So like we're just all over the place.
Yeah.
Mike is more of a punk rocker. He was more into like the Black Flag and um, excuse me, like suicidal tendencies and just gosh, all that kind of stuff. Crust punk, like Discharge and Nausea and gosh, I mean, I'm sure I'm missing a ton,
Yeah. Well,
but
yeah,
I
you
mean, you
can
get the
totally
picture,
hear it in your music.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's just a melting pot, man.
And it works so well. And you wouldn't think it would, especially like crust punk and like doom metal. You wouldn't think
Right,
those two would mix well, but
right.
they do, and it's such an interesting. And it's funny you bring up like Frank Zappa because there are also a lot of like psychedelic elements in your
Mm-hmm.
music.
Right.
So we're talking about crust punk and everything. So what about doom metal? How
Mm-hmm.
big of a or what was really your introduction to doom metal?
I mean, if you count Black Sabbath, I guess it would be them.
Okay.
Like that was, dude, I was like itty bitty. I was like 4 or 5 years old getting into them. That was like late 70s. And so yeah, I was like always way into like Tony Iommi's the man. Like
Oh
to
yeah.
me, he's pretty much written all the badass riffs. Everybody else is just kind of like took from that and sped it up, slowed it down, changed the pattern of it, whatever.
Yeah, he
But
is Black
yeah,
Sabbath.
I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
and So yeah, I mean, starts with them, I think. Um, but yeah, I honestly didn't. I would say probably Cathedral. Like they
Oh,
were one of the
cool.
first. They were one of the first doom bands that I like got into on my own, and this would have been probably 90, 91.
Okay.
I saw a video on MTV or something, and I was like, "Who the fuck is this, man?" I was like, it was like really tuned down and real heavy, and I was like, "Whoa!" It was something off their first EP, like right after the first record came out.
Mm,
Um,
great band, man.
yeah, dude,
Yeah.
they're a huge influence. I always thought they wrote really cool riffs, very Sabbathy, but at the same time, um, they had just a slightly different kind of touch on it. Um, and now Doom's like this huge thing now. Like we play with so many Doom bands, it's kind of funny. Like we've played Maryland Doom Fest, as a matter of fact, and
Yeah, me and
um,
Tommy were talking about that. That
yeah,
sounds like an awesome festival. He was telling me
it,
how he ran into Bobby Liebling
yeah,
at the hotel.
yeah, and that Pentagram. I mean, dude,
Yeah.
like Pentagram, Saint Vitus. Like we
Oh,
played with the Obsessed here like a few months ago, and so like, and Scott Wino was super cool guy. I
mm,
mean, we played with the Skull, and right before Eric Wagner passed away from COVID, and that was weird.
yeah, man.
Um, but yeah, it kind of weird times then. But yeah, it's crazy. Like, um, I wouldn't say I was a huge like fanatic. I love riffy, slow stuff, but I really haven't dove into it quite like some of my label mates and other friends have. Um, but yeah, I go back to Sabbath quite a bit, man. And Cathedral, they're a huge one for me.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. Like that's awesome. Yeah, the first time I remember being in like high school and I didn't know all I really knew of Doom was like Black Sabbath and whatnot. And then I
Hmm. Yeah,
discovered Electric Wizard. It was like, whoa.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you
I
can
like
I didn't
them.
realize you can crank it up to 15. I was
Right,
just
yeah.
blown away, but yeah, man, really awesome stuff to hear. So I'm just curious. We're talking about some influences and whatnot. I'd love to know the story of how the band formed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, Mike and I are the bass player and myself. We were in
Yeah.
that it was a crust punk band. It was called Initial Detonation, and we put out a few like demos and a couple of EPs on vinyl, like 4-song EPs. And we did some touring. We did mainly East Coast and Midwest, some stuff up north, Canada a little bit. This was like 97 into 99 and 2000.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Um, so that's where we initially met and started writing together. And then, like I said, I took a break until about 2008. And I guess Mike and a couple of his friends, they were playing what was to be Gravehuffer. It was a little different. It was called Ether Bunny. And
Wow.
yeah. And I guess Mike played guitar and another guy played bass. And Mike was like, "Man, I want to switch back to bass." He goes, "Guitar's just not for me." And he could play guitar, but he just didn't. I don't know. I guess he just wasn't feeling it. So they called me up and they're like, "Hey, man, are you doing anything? You want to play music again?" I was like, "Yeah, dude. I think I'm ready to get back to it." And so Mike went back to bass and I played guitar, and they showed me the songs that they had, and I had started writing stuff, and so that was basically became our first record. And actually, now that I think about it, the drummer on that first record and the second record, he was also an Initial Detonation with Mike and I. So it was basically the instrumentalists of that band, and with a different singer.
Interesting.
And yeah, so we had a lot of history there and a lot of writing chemistry and everything. And we did a couple records with that lineup. And Larry Deerdorf, the drummer on those first couple records, he kind of I don't know if he just got burnt out or what, but he doesn't do a whole lot of music stuff anymore. So he pretty much said peace out, and we'll have to look for another drummer or whatever. So that's what we did, and we've kind of been looking for drummers ever since, to be honest. And
Okay.
because we've had different people help us out and record with us and tour with us, and but we technically don't have a permanent drummer right now, and we haven't, and I think since 2016 or 17, we've just been playing with fill-ins and guys helping us out. But the guy we got now, well, we got two guys helping us out. One guy, he lives in Colorado. It's like 10 hours away.
Yeah.
His name's Todd Morrison, and he's in 4 or 5 other bands. But he that's like all he wants to do is play music. So I mean, to me, he's our drummer. But you know, we'll see what happens. And then we got another guy helping us out play local shows when Todd can't, and his name's Luke Randolph, and he's in a few other bands too. He plays guitar and sings in another band, and so that's kind of his main deal. But he does I think graduated from the college I work at, actually. He was a drum major, and so he could do all the hand stuff, but he wasn't as experienced doing like the double bass and stuff like that. And so he had a crash course in learning like all the foot stuff on drums with us, and he recorded the Dante song, actually. And so that was his first recording.
Okay.
And yeah, which is kind of fucking wild, to be
Wow.
honest.
Yeah.
And I mean, he kicks ass, man. He did a really good job. And but Todd did the other 5 songs on the record. And then Todd's also done we recorded some covers as well. Like we did a Godflesh cover, we did a Sabbath cover, which has a
Yeah.
Frank Zappa kind of beginning, and then we did a Twisted Sister cover. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're just all
What made you want to cover Children of the Grave?
well. That's something we talked about for gosh, oh my god. I mean, we talked about that way back in the '90s when we were doing Initial Detonation. We ended up covering a Hand of Doom in that band, and we covered Hand of Doom and Gravehuffer too. Actually, like way back when we first started, we did Hand of Doom, and we did a Celtic Frost cover, and we did
Cool.
Into the Crypt Arrays, and then we did Venom in League with Satan, and we've done some other stuff too. Motorhead, we did Iron Fist. Like we just do kind of whatever we are into at the time, you know. So, but
Yeah.
we're playing the Godflesh cover live right now, and I'm sure we'll switch it up as the year goes. We'll see what happens. So
That's cool. That's awesome. Now,
yeah,
I'm just curious, where does the name Gravehuffer come from? That's such
that's
a crazy awesome name.
right. Yeah,
Gravehuffer.
right. It's funny. Like we were called Crom initially. Okay, like
Okay.
from
Yeah.
2008 to 2011. That's what we were called. We were never like we were never 100% sold on that name, and it was just kind of like, we'll use it for now, kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that we were starting to get confused with other bands called Crom, and we just didn't realize how many there were, and because this was like 2008 to 2011, and the internet was still, I mean, it was around, but social media wasn't that much of a thing, and it was back in the MySpace days, and so that's kind of when we started seeing some of the other bands called that, and there was people that were asking us like, "Oh, so you guys are from Italy?" And I'm like, "No." I guess there was a band called Crom from Italy that was a metal band, and so we were like, "Man, we probably ought to change that name." So a friend of ours had this project that he was going to do, and it was like a rockabilly kind of band, and it was called Gravehuffer. And Mike and I were like, man, that's a cool name, dude. It's kind of weird, but it's just cool. And we're like, it sounds like a metal band though. And he's like, well, it's gonna be, it's kind of like a Misfits kind of thing. We're like, all right, okay, whatever. And well, I mean, I love the Misfits, but still, we're kind of like, I don't know, man. I kind of get it, but I kind of don't. So he never got that thing going. And so we basically asked our friend, his name's Dozer. We're like, hey Doze, can we use that band name, Gravehuffer? And he was like, yeah, as long as I get a free piece of merch every once in a while. I'm like, all right. So
That's
occasionally we'll throw
awesome.
him a shirt or whatever, And so yeah, it's basically how it came out. And um, our singer at the time, James, he decided to write a song called Gravehuffer, and so um, you know, to give it some more meaning, that was kind of our tip of the hat to Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden. They have songs that are the band name. So we thought that'd be cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's cool. That's a cool piece of
Yeah.
lore right there.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
now, this is more of the production side of things, but I'm just curious,
Mm.
what software do you guys use to record your stuff?
Um.
Or is that more
That's
on Tommy's side?
no. That's Mike, our bass player. He's got all
Okay.
that stuff.
Like
I
Pro
think he used
Tools?
no. I think it's like Adobe or something. Like a audition or something like that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm
I use
pretty
that as
sure.
well.
Yeah, I think that's what he uses. And so because I think he'd had an Adobe because he had Photoshop and stuff like that, and Audition just came with it, and so he just started using it, and that's just what he's used to now. And my cat's freaking out. Sorry.
It's all
And
right. No, he made a little cameo earlier.
yeah, he did. But so yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what he uses, and he thought about switching to I think Logic or Reaper. I can't remember which
Reaper,
one,
yeah,
but
Reaper's like the
yeah,
free one.
is it okay?
Yeah,
And but he's like, you know what? I'll just keep using what I know, and so yeah, that's what we use, and it's just he's been using that, gosh, for like 10, 12 years now.
cool. Well, it sounds
Yeah,
great regardless, and it's a
thanks. Yeah,
great
thanks, man.
software. I use it for my podcast.
Oh,
It's
really?
so easy to use, and it's
Yeah, it
like
is.
it's awesome. Now, we were talking about some of the songwriting process earlier. I'm just curious, does weed and psychedelics have a big like part in your songwriting? I know a lot of
Well,
bands will like
yeah,
write high or like
right.
trip, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, yeah, for some of us, like personally, I don't, but the other guys, yeah, they're typically that way when they write, like Mike in particular, because sometimes he'll write something and then he'll kind of forget about it, and then I'll record it or I'll remember it or whatever, and then we'll get together the next week or whatever, and I'll show the parts, and he's like, "I must have been high when I wrote that. I don't remember that." So, like, yep, because I never would have wrote that sober or whatever. So,
That's
so yeah,
amazing.
yeah, it does happen. It does happen.
Yeah, yeah. So what was the writing and recording process like for Blasphemusic?
Hmm. Dude, that was it was it was at my house that I used to
Okay.
live in, and we had a detached garage, and that's where we practiced, and we recorded out there. We practiced out there, and we recorded vocals in my finished attic, and I mean it was totally DIY. We had a
Yeah.
digital like an old Boss digital recorder that we used to record with, and we recorded everything live, and um, I think we did overdub vocals and maybe one track of guitars just to double track. But like the drums and guitars and the bass on a lot of stuff was live. And we just basically kept the tracks that we played good all the way through. But there's still mistakes here and there. But yeah, it was pretty much just plug it in and go. And but as far as the writing, I'd say half that record was written before I was even in the band,
Oh,
and then
wow.
yeah, and then the other parts were stuff that we either wrote together or a few things that I happened to have lying around or stuff that I had written that I brought to the proceedings or whatever. Um, Now, Blast Music does have four songs that kind of have a little bit different production style, and that was going to be an EP that was recorded as quote unquote Gravehuffer. because let me see. I have to think here. Songs 5 through 18 or 19 or whatever it is, those were written as Crom and released as Crom. It was an album called Chaotic Evil. And when we renamed the band, we re-released it under the Gravehuffer moniker and titled it Blasphemusic. So that's kind of what that is. We wanted to reintroduce those old Crom songs because we still played them. And we still play them as Gravehuffer. It's the same band. We just changed the name. And so that's pretty much what Blasphemusic is. But those first 4 songs are a little bit different style wise. And those we recorded at our drummer's house. And he had, I think that's when we very first started using the Adobe Audition program.
Okay.
And so those have a little bit better sound on those. And those were, we actually tracked everything separately on those first 4 songs.
Cool. Now with the second record, was it the same mindset and the same process, or was it totally different?
It was pretty different. Yeah, that was stuff that was written. I feel like half of that was written like individually, like amongst the guys in the band, and then the other half was kind of at jam sessions. When we would we would rehearse for a show or something like that, and then we would, and inevitably we would start writing something, and that's just how it goes. And then other times we would have ideas we would bring and say, hey, I want to work on this, and then there would be like one riff, and then another guy's like, hey, I'm hearing this, and then we just kind of build it from there. And that's pretty much how that Your Fault record was written. Which that was kind of how we did it in Initial Detonation, to be honest. It was kind of like partly from jamming, and then partly from just ideas that the other guys have brought, and we just kind of pieced them together at rehearsal.
Interesting. So do you feel like throughout the band's whole discography, has the like writing and recording process changed a lot? Or was it like the first 2 Oh yeah? You feel like it's definitely had a big evolution?
It really has. Like every record has had a completely different writing and recording
Wow.
style. Yeah, it's really weird. And part of it has to do with part of it was COVID for Necroeclosion in particular. That was written written and recorded during the lockdown. So we were doing everything separate. We all had like our own microphone screens, and there was only 2 of us at a time doing stuff. And we were all, staying away from each other. And so, yeah, that was pretty weird. But yeah, it was, I think there was one, there's probably a few sessions where there were 3 of us, because there kind of had to be to do drums. Because I would play a scratch kind of like guitar track so the drummer could play off something. And then Mike would be there tracking, just making sure the levels were good and all that. But the room was huge, so we were able to not get each other sick, because we all ended up getting COVID. So we had to really be careful. But
so rough, such a rough time.
It was bizarre. And it was weird because like our old singer James had just left the band, and we got Travis, and who's singing for us now, and we had like 4 shows booked, and I think he had just joined the band, and then like maybe a month later he had 4 shows to do, and we were like traveling too, and he was scared to death, man. He was like, I'm tracking an album with a band I've never been in, like, and he hadn't done any vocals in years. And so, but man, he really, really prepared himself. Like he came in with a notebook and he had lyrics written out, and like he was super prepared, and that impressed us because we tried out a few other guys, and no one was even close to Travis. And so, yeah, it was really awesome. And funnily enough, Travis was like our old singer James's like best friend.
Oh, there you go.
It was so weird.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. But
Cool.
So anyway, we had all these shows booked, and Travis was like just freaking out about it, and then they ended up getting canceled because of COVID. So he was like, "We're not gonna just concentrate on recording." So, you know,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. Of course, it was like that, you know, and
Hmm.
but very cool to hear. Really awesome insights there.
Yeah, thanks,
Now
man.
as we wrap up here, I'm just so what's the best way for fans to keep in touch with everything Gravehuffer? Is it the social medias, Black Duma Records? What would you
Yeah,
say?
it's pretty much all the above.
Okay.
Like I usually send people to our Bandcamp page. It's gravehuffer.bandcamp.com, and it's got all of our other social media links on there. But we are on Facebook, of course, and Instagram and Twitter. We got a YouTube channel. What else? As far as like streaming, we're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, iTunes,
Awesome.
Deezer, Napster, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everywhere. So
Napster.
yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Pandora, all that stuff.
Cool. And
But
you guys have physical releases as well, which is
yes, yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
we do, yeah, man. We try to keep it old school, and we're still doing the streaming as well. But I mean, the physical copies are kind of the bread and butter. I mean, that's when we play shows. That's what people buy. They're not
Totally.
buying downloads when we're at a show. They're buying CDs and vinyl and shirts and all that. So that's what helps us get down the road.
Great to hear, man. Well, Ritchie, thank you so
Thanks,
much for doing this, man. Really
thanks,
appreciate it.
Brandon. Thank you, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
of
you.
course. Always. I'm Brandon Battick, and this is Disturbing the Priest.
It's death! I've just seen death!